It is for each of us to look into our own hearts and to do what we have been called to do in our communities for one another, and not to wait for somebody else to do it, not to wait for government to do it or for anybody else to solve our problems, but to do what my professor told us to do. Figure out what your gift is. Figure out how you bring that to the table. Figure out how you bring other people together and lead them to bring their gifts and get it done.
This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 145. What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode number 145 of the L3 Leadership Podcast. My name is Doug Smith, and I'm the founder of L3 Leadership. We're a leadership development company devoted to helping you become the best leader that you can be. In this episode, you're going to get to hear a talk by Laura Ellsworth. Laura is Jones Day's first partner in charge of global community service initiatives. She is literally changing the world day to day, and I really believe this is one of the best talks I've ever heard, period. Not just at L3 Breakfast. Like, this was one of the best talks I've ever heard, and I really think that it has the potential to change your life. So really excited to bring this one to you guys today. But before we do, just a few announcements. One, if you're new to this podcast, I just want to let you know that we believe in you, and we are committed to bringing you 3 or 4 episodes every single month to help you grow to your maximum potential as a leader. If you've been with us for a while listening to the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you would hop on iTunes or whatever you listen to podcast through and leave a rating and review, as well as subscribe. It really helps us grow our listenership organically. So thank you for that. I want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. Henny Jewelers are a jeweler owned by my friend John Henny, and my wife and I got our engagement and our wedding rings through Henny Jewelers, and they're just an incredible family-run business. They not only have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. John gave Laura and I a book to help us prepare for our marriage. In fact, they give every engaged couple a book to help them prepare for their marriage, and he's been investing in me personally as a leader, as a father, and as a husband now for many years. So I'm just so grateful for Henny Jewelers. If you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. I want to thank our other sponsor, Alex to Land and Real Estate Resources. Alex is a full-time realtor with Keller Williams Realty, whose team is committed to providing clients with highly effective premier real estate experiences throughout the greater Pittsburgh region. Alex is a member and supporter of L3 Leadership, and he would love the opportunity to connect with you. If you want to learn more about Alex and his great work, you can go to pittsburghpropertyshowcase.com. Let's jump right into Laura's talk. As I mentioned, Laura Ellsworth is one of the best leaders that I've come in contact with. I'd read you her resume, but we would literally not be able to start this podcast for another hour. So I'll be brief, and I would just say that if I had to sum up who Laura Ellsworth is, I would say that she's the definition of a world changer. It's funny, actually, before I have someone speak at one of our events, I always send them a list of leadership challenges that I've collected from the leaders that we influence. And Laura looked over the list that I sent her, and she said, "Doug, I'll cover every single one of these in 30 minutes. And I thought, wow, that would be pretty impressive. But let me tell you, she did. Again, this was one of the best talks I've ever heard. And why I loved it, I mean, I laughed in this talk. I cried in this talk. And Laura in this talk shares 5 stories that had a huge impact on her life. And I really believe if you'll withdraw all the lessons that Laura shares, your life will never be the same. So with that being said, enjoy this talk by Laura Ellsworth.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you all so much for being here this morning on an early Saturday morning and fighting your way through people doing good work in the world to get here. So thank you very much for being here. I want to play a game with you guys in this talk. So on your table is this little 2-sided one-pager. And Doug sent this to me when I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, well, I can send you a list of some of the issues that our members raise for us. So he sent me this list. I said, okay, here's my challenge. I'm going to cover every single one of these topics in 35 minutes, okay? So grade my papers at the end during the Q&A. If you don't know how I covered this issue, ask me and I'll tell you, okay? That's the done. Okay. So let me tell you a little tiny bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk to you about a concept that I really believe in called leadership through service. And leadership through service is a way that you can do everything you care about at once. One-stop shopping in your life. Okay? So hold that thought. I'm going to get to that at the end. So I grew up in New York City, like actually in New York City. And I fell in love with a guy when I was in college. and followed him to Pittsburgh. I had no intention of going to law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer my whole life, but I followed the guy, worked out okay. But I get to law school here in Pittsburgh. I crack open the book and I think, oh my God, this is the most interesting thing ever. I fell totally in love with the city of Pittsburgh for reasons that we'll get to. And this became my place. So fast forward to today, I've been a practicing trial lawyer for almost 35 years. For 25 of those, I've been with a law firm called Jones Day, which is, depending on the day you count, the largest law firm in the world. 2,500 lawyers in 44 offices on 5 continents. And my husband says, 2,500 lawyers, anybody can join your law firm. I said, well, that's true. And for probably the last 15 years, I've been on the global management committee of the firm. So all of these offices all around the world, all of these people representing the largest companies in the world. And it has been an amazing journey, and I've learned a tremendous amount in doing that. And about a year and a half ago, our global managing partner came to me and he said, you know, I've watched what you did in Pittsburgh, which we'll get to in a moment. And he said, I understand how you believe in the ways that we can bring our gifts to the community and the people around us. And I've seen how you did it in Pittsburgh, and I want you to do that in 44 offices on 5 continents, and I've invented a new job for you to do that. So I think to myself, great, took me 15 years in Pittsburgh. I got this, right? No problem. So for the last year and a half, I've had this global role, and he said to me, I just ask one thing of you. He said, we have enough people in the world who talk about things. I want you to do things. I want you to identify really big problems that need to be solved, and then I want you to use all the resources of a global law firm and just go solve them. So easier said than done, right? So some of the things that we have been working on are, and I'll just give you some examples of the way we think about this. We have invented something called VetLex. So we came to learn through a lot of the work that we do with veterans in the community that there was no national pro bono for free legal service for veterans in this country. There was no way for a veteran who needed a lawyer of any kind to find somebody that would help them. And so we went out and spent a year and a half and $1.5 million and created the first system to provide pro bono legal services for veterans in this country. And we were in the process of recruiting 40,000 lawyers to fill it. Right? And that was simply going out, seeing the need, having the ask. And we met at one point with the secretary of the VA, and he listened to this and he said, this is awesome. This is great. What do you want from me? And we said, we don't want anything from you. We just wanted to know that this was really necessary because we find it hard to believe that it is, but we'll go do this. We'll go do this. We have a telemedicine project underway where we are aggregating all of the educational resources that are provided by academic medical centers in the United States, who we represent, and we are aggregating them and making them available to hospitals throughout the third world that the Jones Day Foundation supports. So you had one hospital connected to one African hospital in one discipline, right? Education in heart in a hospital in Botswana. Somebody else's trauma medicine with one hospital in Haiti. Somebody else's pediatric oncology with a hospital in Ethiopia. So we just went to everybody and said, if we create a new entity, you guys all contribute what you already do for free and everybody gets everything. Good plan? That's a good plan. And it just took somebody to say, all right, well, let's just do that, right? It's just an organizational plan. We have an immigration project underway. We represent more than 300 unaccompanied women and unaccompanied children and women who have immigrated from Central America. We have now opened effectively an office on the border in Laredo, Texas, to represent those folks. And we're working nationally to do pathways to citizenship, so to provide legal training to women in the immigrant community so that they can then train others on the pathway to citizenship. We have an international human trafficking program underway where we're working with courts and hospitals to identify victims of human trafficking and then path them into safe places around the globe. So we have projects underway in Europe and Asia and Australia, the United States. We have a peaceful protest project underway where we provide training to cities that are undergoing protest activity, because as lawyers and people who believe in rule of law, we believe in the First Amendment, and we believe in the peaceful exchange of ideas. And we were very concerned where we saw a couple of things. One, we saw people confusing the right to express their own opinion with the exchange of ideas, right? The First Amendment does protect your right to say what you think, but it also protects the right of the person who disagrees with you to say what they think. And if you believe in the First Amendment, you have to honor that exchange of ideas. And so we are convening groups across the country, and there'll be one in Pittsburgh, where we bring together police and protesters and government officials and students, and we talk about the framework that has been built over decades around the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. If you want to get arrested, if that's part of your mission, there's a rule for that too. But the rules have developed because it is important that we be able to maintain a peaceful setting while having a very vigorous exchange of ideas. And there are certain rules that have been created to allow that. And when everybody understands them, we think that fosters a better communication and a better outcome, right? Because just like when you argue with your spouse, right? You're over here, they're over here, and the truth probably is somewhere here, right? But if you argue really vigorously and really hard, you'll get there. But you have to be able to have that dialogue in a peaceful way. So those are some of the kinds of things that we're doing around the world, and it's pretty cool. It's like the best job on the face of the earth, I think. But let me tell you, since the purpose of this is leadership, let me tell you how I got to that job, right? So it all starts with who you are and where you come from. And so I grew up, as I said, in New York City, and my dad was really the world expert. He was a doctor. He almost stroked out when I went to law school. But he was a doctor in a disease called retinoblastoma. He was the leading doctor in the world in this disease. And it is a disease of the retina that occurs in infants. Was at the time he started working in it almost universally fatal, and it was also hereditary. So he spent much of his career telling people not only that their child was going to die, but that they could never have another child. And so this was an enormously difficult profession, as you can imagine. And I remember him coming home and just holding my face in his hands. I'd say, "What are you doing?" And he would say, "I just need to look at a healthy child for a minute." Right? But he, nonetheless, as hard as it was, he dedicated himself to this. And his legacy, at the time of his death, the fatality rate had gone from 92% from when he started to 30%. And that was his legacy to a generation of people. And I'll tell you a story about that later. But he was also doctor to Bob Hope and Frank Sinatra and all these people. Now, many times I tell this story, people were like, "Who are they?" Please tell me you know who they are. Okay. So I grew up like Uncle Bob, Uncle Frank, like these were just the people that I knew. But what my dad would do is he was so interested in this disease of retinoblastoma that he would find children all across the world who had this disease, and he would fly them to New York using Hope and Sinatra's money. He would fly them to New York, but they had nowhere to stay, so they would stay with us, right? So I grew up my whole life with these families of sick children that were staying in our house because that's what you did. And at one point, my mom, who was a nurse, and so she really, got the whole thing, but she put her hands on her hips and she said, "Bob, we can't have this anymore. We need to fix this." And so she organized all of her friends, and they did a little fundraising thing, and they bought a house in Harlem, and they collected all their furniture from their friends, and they recruited us little kids one summer. We went and spent the whole summer painting this house in Harlem, and this became the prototype for Ronald McDonald House. Now, that happened because my mom put her hands on her hips and said, "Bob, can't do this anymore," right? These are individual people who, through their passion, decided to do something themselves about a problem, not waiting for somebody else to do it, right? Not waiting for what I call the F word, right? Funding. "Oh, if we only had funding, I could do this and that and the other thing." Enough, right? That is the excuse of a lazy mind, right? Now, you need funding. That is a part of the equation, but don't ever use it as an excuse, right? So this is my history. All right, so that's set that. So one of the stories, I'm going to tell you 4 stories, maybe a 5th, if I have time. First story is about my dad. So my dad's got like this killer practice life. He's the man. He's whatever. And so I went into his office one day at home, and he had his head in his hands like this. I said, "Dad, what's the matter?" He said, "Look at this." And he had spread out on his desk the resumes of all the people who were applying to come work for him. And everybody in the world who was interested in this disease wanted to work with him. So they're all spread out on the table. So I look at them, and every single person on the table, every single person, had an A+ average. Not an A average, an A+ average. So I said, wow, that's really impressive. I said, what's your problem? You having trouble picking between them? He said, no, I can't find anybody who's failed. I said, what do you mean? And he said, I can't find anybody who's failed. And he said, in my practice, all your patients are going to die. And if you haven't failed and overcome failure, you won't be able to do what I do. And I share that with you because I've heard a lot of people talk about, it's important to fail because that's where you learn and all of the above. And I believe that. But when he said that to me in that setting, I heard it differently. And so I share that story with you because he was absolutely right. And I have found that to be true in my own life, that people who have succeeded at everything in their lives are a problem for me. Because in my world, as in my dad's world, you're going to fail. Because if you do anything that is really ambitious and really hard, you won't know how to do it perfectly. If you're doing something that's really new that nobody's ever done before, which is what we should all aspire to do, you will fail at some point because we all learn by doing, right? So think about my dad with his head in his hands, truly looking for someone who has failed because he was right. It makes you stronger and better at what you do. So fast forward, I'm in college, and I went to Princeton undergrad and didn't always really value the opportunity that I had at the time. So I had the school has preceptorships, right, where it's 12 students with the real professor. So, and this professor had actually won a Nobel Prize, right? So I have the opportunity to be among 12 people with a guy who won the Nobel Prize. Am I paying attention to that? No, because I had been out the night before at a tech rehearsal. I was a theater person, right? So we'd been out, how many of you are theater people? Anybody got a theater background? All right. The tech rehearsal keeps you up all night long before a show. So I'd been up all night long. I was wrecked. I'm sitting like this in the chair. Everybody else in the room is sort of like this for some other reason in the chair. And so the professor is really trying to soldier on. At one point, all of a sudden, he slams his book like this, and we all jumped. Now we're awake. And he said, look. He said, believe me. This was a philosophy class. He said, believe me. I have told you guys every single thing I can see in this text. Your job is to bring to the table something that I haven't seen. And if you're not prepared to do that, you can get out. And we all kind of sat there. And it was the first time I had ever realized in my entire life that my job was to bring something to the table of myself that only I could bring. And it was the job of everybody else around the table, too. It wasn't just an opportunity to bring something to the table. It was an obligation I had to the other people around the table to bring something of my unique self. And in that morning, all of these vaguely hungover and overtired people started to talk about what that text meant to them because of who they were and the course of their life that had brought them to that table. And it was one of the most beautiful and transformational things I ever saw. And the professor had tears in his eyes because he had made his point to us. And it was a powerful thing. I've never forgotten it. And so I share that with you because part of leadership is bringing who you are to the table. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter that the guy at the head of the table won the Nobel Prize. You have something to tell him that he doesn't know. You have something of value to bring to the table. And it is not just an opportunity, it is an obligation to those around you and to your community and to the issues that you care about. So forget the Nobel Prize. Bring it on, okay? The third story I'll tell you happened in a really cool place. So we have the privilege of representing the Prince of Wales Foundation in the United States. And as sort of a thank you, they host what's called the summer program. That's MME, that happens over in England. And it's sort of like tea at Highgrove, black tie at St. James Palace, black tie at Buckingham Palace, and the Queen's box at Ascot, okay? So I am shallow enough. I have read every single one of the books about the royal family, right, including the Butlers. I mean, it's just spectacular. So I am just like over the moon. This is just absolutely spectacular. And I'll tell you the best part of this, that when you go to Highgrove, which is the house where Charles and Camilla live, there's dog hair on the couch, which I just thought was just fabulous. So we are sitting in, it's the black, so it's been like this mind-blowing week. I am just like agog all the time. And so we're sitting in Buckingham Palace, and it's black tie, and it's the jewels. Like, they actually wear the jewels with the little crowns and everything. I'm telling you, all the people in the room, it was just incredible. And I looked across the room, and my husband was talking to Liam Neeson, and so he comes back over to me, and I'm like, oh my God, like, how cool was that? He goes, what? I said, do you know who you were just talking to? And he said, no. So they'd been talking about something else anyway. So we're sitting at dinner, and it's the dinner in Buckingham Palace. It was in the throne room of Buckingham Palace, and it's all this like beautiful lighting, the china and silver. I love that kind of stuff. And there's this giant solid gold thing in the middle of the table with some like little naked dude leaning like this into your salad, and it's just amazing setting. So I turned to the guy on my left, and Charles is at like that table from me, and Camilla's sitting at that table from me, and the room is filled with these amazing people. So I turned to the guy on my left, who turns out to be Paris Hilton's agent, big funder of the Princess Charities. And I said to him, oh, Paris Hilton, I bet she's really smart, right? And he looks me dead in the eye, and he says, she is the stupidest person on the planet. So I'm like, even I don't know where to go with this, right? So I turned to the person on my right, and I said, so he turns out to be with St. Jude's in Memphis. I said, oh, St. Jude's. I said, did you ever run into a guy named Barrett Hike? And he said, Barrett Hike is my best friend. I said, well, Barrett Hike was my dad's protege. He was like a son to my father. And he said, oh my God, is your dad Bob Ellsworth? And I said, yeah. And he starts telling me these stories about my dad that I have heard from my dad about Barrett. This is 25 years after my dad had died. And it was stories about how my dad had taught him how to have the courage to devote yourself to this disease, despite the toll it takes on you as a human being, how to have a family and raise a family when you are pretty much tapped out at the end of the day from what you have seen and done, and you walk in and your children who know nothing about what it has taken to live your life that day are like, Daddy, 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 do this for me, do this for me. About being a person of dedication, about being a person of science, about all of these things that I knew were really precious to my dad and to have taught Barrett. So I, of course, start to cry. And so this guy puts his arm around me. So my husband, who's sitting across the table, because they separate you, is across the table. He looks over. I'm crying. The strange guy has his hand around me. And my husband is like, what the? At which point, the lights go out, and Rod Stewart comes out because he's the entertainment for the party. So I sit there in the dark, in the throne room of Buckingham Palace, with tears running down my face, Rod Stewart singing. You can still see all the diamonds glittering in the dark. And I thought the most important thing in all the wealth and history and power of this room, the most important thing just happened to me. And that is the knowledge that decades away, thousands and thousands of miles away, I was reminded that it is who we are to one another that endures. The lessons that we teach in the quiet moments to one another, to the person who is sitting next to us, to the person who is in the office next to us. Those are the stories that are told 25 years later, thousands of miles away in the throne room of Buckingham Palace. So what I ask you today, and what I ask you to take from this is, to whom are you, Dr. Bob? Who's going to be telling a story about you 25 years from now and thousands of miles away? whether it's in the halls of Buckingham Palace or a tiny village in Africa or the jungles of South America. And who is your Dr. Bob? We all have a Dr. Bob in our lives. And the only other thing I will ask you just really quietly is whoever that is, go thank them. Go tell them. And now, Barrett Hike has died, my dad has died, and I tell that story because that's their story. And I do honor to them by sharing it with you. So remember, to whom are you, Dr. Bob? Always find a way to be a Dr. Bob, and it is not too early to start. You don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner. You do not have to be a world-famous doctor. But you do need to be a Dr. Bob to somebody every day. So let me fast forward a little bit now to my current job, where I am talking to an organization that we work with in Ethiopia that does pediatric oncology in Ethiopia. So one of the things that the Jones Day Foundation funded is the first pediatric oncology program in Ethiopia through a former partner of mine whose daughter came down with cancer. And she left the firm to deal with her 12-year-old daughter, who has subsequently gone into remission, but the doctor who treated her daughter at Georgetown Hospital in Washington was Ethiopian and was in the course of starting a program for pediatric oncology in Ethiopia. And so Julie, my former partner, became the head of the organization now called Aslan, which started this pediatric oncology. She came to Jones Day. Jones Day helped support this, and now Ethiopia has their first pediatric oncology program, right? Which I have often thought, I know Julie prayed and prayed and prayed, why did my daughter come down with cancer? Why are we faced with this? Maybe the answer is because your purpose in life was to start the first pediatric oncology program in Ethiopia. I don't know, but I've thought about it a lot. Anyway, so I'm talking to Julie, and we're talking about something that we're going to do in this telemedicine project to help them in Ethiopia. And she said, you know, this will be so cool because if we're connected to academic medical centers, we can finally use these devices that we have. They're so cool. They're these really new devices. And you hold them up to somebody's face, and they can diagnose a really rare form of cancer in children. It's called retinoblastoma. And I said, Julie, that device was invented at my kitchen table by Barrett Hike and Dr. Bob, and you're using it now in Ethiopia. So I'm sort of stunned by this. I had sort of a hand of God moment. And so I go back to my office in Washington, and I tell the story to my team at Jones Day that is working on this project with me. And the one girl across the table goes kind of pale. I said, are you all right? And she said, my dad did the genetics for your dad on his initial paper on retinoblastoma, and I never made the connection until just this moment. And I said, well, you know, I remember your dad now because in the day when we didn't have desktop printing, you had to trace with a ruler little circles and squares when you did the genetics tables, and you had to color in the ones where there was an incidence of disease. My job was that when I came home from school, I had to color in the circles that were, because you had to get right to the edges and stuff. So her dad had done the work that I colored in. And so I think about the pathways in life that God takes us. And my belief that all connected up through absolute chance is zero. It's just zero to me. And that, to me, is the hand of God in our lives, in mine. And I tell the story a lot because I believe in it. A couple of months ago, there was somebody in the front row, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, I came to this today because I wanted to meet you in person because my brother was one of your dad's patients 40 years ago. And your dad saved his life. And while he became blind, because you have to remove the eye, he became the world champion blind skydiver. Can you believe it? And he climbed the highest peak on 5 continents, blind. And he said, I just wanted to thank you because he never would have done that without your dad, and I came to tell you. So the hand of God continues in my life because that guy didn't happen to live in Pittsburgh by chance. I'm just saying, right? So I believe in that. All right, so let me go on and tell you one last story about my mom, and then I'll tell you about leadership with service, and we can go to questions. So my mom, who you heard about, right, was a nurse. And she was just like this amazing woman, my best friend in the whole world. Crystal may have heard this story before, but put up with me. And she was diagnosed when I was 24 years old with stage 4 ovarian cancer, which was at the time a death sentence. And she, as an oncology nurse, knew exactly how that was going to go. And so shortly after she was diagnosed, now this is back in the 70s, okay? So I know. This is back in the 70s. And it was a time of like really crazy permed hair and, wild colored clothes and shoes dyed to match, right? I mean, it was a crazy time. And so shortly after her diagnosis, we were at a wedding together. And we're fully outfitted in 70s gear. And for some reason, we got the giggles. I can't remember why, but we got the giggles. And when you get the giggles at like a formal thing, like in church, you just laugh harder because you're just dying. And so there's tears coming down our face, and we're just laughing and laughing. And on the way to the reception, we're still laughing and chatting. And she says, "Hey, I want to take you somewhere." And she turns right into the cemetery. So I got really quiet, and she's still chatting on. And it had rained in the morning. This was in the fall. It had rained in the morning. And the sun had come out in the afternoon for the wedding. Perfect. And it was that beautiful, beautiful long light of fall, And so she takes me by the hand, and we walk through the wet leaves to this place under this beautiful tree by this little brook. And she said, "I brought you here today because this is where I'm going to be buried. And I hope you come and visit me from time to time. But whenever you do, I want you to remember today when we were laughing." And then she said, "Look, we both know that I'm going to die from this. And I can either do that well, or I can do that badly. But either way, I'm going to have to do it. So I have decided to do it well. And I want you to help me." And I didn't know what to say for a minute. So I looked down, and I saw that we were standing in a puddle in our dyed to match shoes, and that the dye was running out of our shoes into this puddle and swirling together. And when I saw the colors swirling together, I knew the answer to her question. And I said, "Yes, I will help you." And in the year and a half or so that we had together, she taught me some of the most profound lessons of my life. And they were lessons that I would not have paid attention to had I not known our time was short. And had she not said to me, I want you to help me. I want you to really, really listen. And over that time, she said a lot of things, and she said, "There's a lot of things that I've taught you that you may or may not use in life, but I know you're going to die. And so I'm going to teach you how to do that too." And she taught me some amazing, amazing lessons. But of all of them, the most powerful, I think, was the one that she introduced me to that day standing in the cemetery, because it was about the power of choice. The power of choice. Because she chose to make something incredibly powerful of her death and of her dying, to teach her daughter just amazing, amazing lessons about the process of death, about the process of life, about what matters in life. And she chose to make that powerful and meaningful and enduring. And that even faced with something as profound and uncontrollable as our own death, you have the power to choose what you will make of it. And there isn't a person on this earth who can take away from you the power of choice other than you. And so never, ever, ever, ever give that away. Never think you don't have it. No matter what happens to you, however bad it is you to choose what you are going to make of that. And no matter what it is, I will tell you, as sure as I'm sitting here, there is a way that you can choose to make that matter for good in the world, no matter how bad it is. And so always know you are never a victim, because nothing can take away from you the power of choice. So use it the way that my mom did. And there's a quote, I have this wall of quotes over my desk, and they're all taped on. It's very unartistic. But one of them is from William Jennings Bryan, which you've probably heard. And it is that destiny is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. And so my mom was right about that. And the reason I share that story really broadly with a lot of people is because I want to honor her choice. And I suspect that a lot of what I do in the world now, in medicine and in telemedicine and all these things that I'm trying to do around the world, is because she made a choice about teaching me the importance of that. And so that everything I do now is a result of the choice she made. And so I just share that with you because she was a pretty special person. All right, so let me get to leadership through service, and then we'll open it up. Here's the idea. Find something that you're really, really passionate about. And you guys are all here this morning, so I know you got this. Find something that you're really passionate about. In Pittsburgh, there is no better place, I'm telling you, in the country, maybe in the world, than Pittsburgh to do this. Unique community, powerful community. Find something that you're really passionate about. Take a look at the different kinds of organizations that do that work. So let's just say it's animals, okay? There's 10 organizations that do animals. Take a look at who's on their board and ask yourself, who do I want to watch me in action? Who do I want to watch me in action? Business development, right? You want to do business development. You want people to know how smart and talented and thoughtful and full of integrity and like awesome you are, right? So identify who's where that you want to know that about you. And then figure out a way to get involved in that organization. Do you want to join the board? Do you just have a really good idea for a project that they need to get done and you know how to do it? Go to somebody who's involved in the organization and say, you know what? You really need this done. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to lead this project for you because you need to get this done. Not going to them and saying, hi, can I help in any way? No. I've identified something you need done. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Work with me and I'll do this for you. All right? So everybody will say yes to that. Let me just tell you right now. Okay. Then just rock it. Just be who you are, right? Just be who you are. Doing something that you love and care about on an issue that's important to you to do good in the community and make it better at the end, right? So then what have you done? Rather than going into a cocktail networking event where you hand your card to somebody and tell them how awesome you are, you demonstrate how awesome you are, right? That card's going to be put in a drawer or thrown in the garbage. But the memory of watching you lead, do something, deliver something to an organization that's important to me, I've already self-selected into a common passion with you because I'm already involved in that organization, right? You come to me and say, I want to help you with that organization. I already feel a connection with you because we're already united on this thing. I say, awesome. And then I watch you. Then I'm impressed. Then I decide for myself that you're smart, powerful leader, creative, good with people, can lead a team. Awesome. And you're learning skills the whole time you do it. Because as you know, everything you get involved in, right, you learn a little something different. And while I know you would do a good job, remember the thing about we're all going to make mistakes? If you're going to make a mistake in leadership and management and project design, make it outside your workplace. Why take the risk? Okay? Now, you should always take risks in the workplace. I think that's a good thing, right? I think it shows an ability to grow. But you can grow your skills in a safer place, safe zone, right? So you grow your skills, you contribute to good, you market yourself, you meet other people, and in this town, the reason it's so cool in this town is because the CEOs show up to play. They really do sit on boards. They really do come. They really do care. You're really talking to the top people in town when you do what I'm saying. And triple extra bonus points if you take your kid with you. I always took my son, starting when he was about 6 years old, particularly if it had something to do with his demographic. So if we were working with kids, I would sit with him in the car on the way home and I would say, honey, like, I wasn't really relating to the 6-year-old on this issue. What would you recommend? And he would tell me. And so I was trying to sort of learn from the story I told you about my preceptorship, right? It doesn't matter how old you are. You will have valuable perspectives to bring to the table, and you ought to start bringing them to the table. I was trying to teach him that. And he performed. Like, he told me stuff about 6-year-olds I didn't know. I shouldn't tell you the story, but I will. I had to take the deposition of a child in a case. And there was an allegation that the child was completely incapacitated by something, couldn't ever use a computer, couldn't read, was just a total disaster, which didn't seem right to me, but I had to. So really, because I was just thinking of something to say when we were in the car together, I said, honey, this kid's 12 years old. I've got to take the deposition. What would you, recommend? He said, well, does she play this computer game? I said, I don't know. He said, well, you should ask her if she does, because if she does, you need to read, because you need to read. It changes every time, like the attributes that you put into the little meme, and you have to do it in under 4.6 seconds on this one. And he told me about this computer game that would involve all the skills that she allegedly didn't have. I've never heard of this computer game. I've never seen anyone play it. I had no idea. So I'm sitting in the deposition, and so I say to this little girl, hey, do you play so-and-so? She goes, yeah, I'm a grand champion. And I think to myself, here we go, okay? Now, that was my 12. Now, I shouldn't tell you that because I'm supposed to be like this fabulous trial lawyer, and I'm not supposed to be getting my tips from a kid, okay? But just goes to show you that if you open your heart, you open your mind, you don't think you're the smartest person in the room, you might be the smartest person in the room because you'll learn from the people around you, even the little kids, right? So, but I would take my son to all of these things, and he would always, engage. And now he's a freshman in college down at GW, and he wants to do economic development work in Africa and run projects in Africa that help other people, right? How cool is that? And so I think if you ever feel like there aren't enough hours in your day to do everything that is asked of you, why don't you try to do everything in the same hour? Why don't you do leadership by service? Why don't you practice your leadership skills, do business development, do good in the community, teach your kids, honor God, and feed your soul all at the same time? That's how you get it all done. Do it all at once. And that's leadership through service. So I encourage you to do that. There is no better town in the world in which to do that. And the last thing I will close is with sort of one larger point. We've all watched the division in our country of late. And Judge Gorsuch, so in my jurisdiction, right, the Supreme Court, you all watched the confirmation hearings of Judge Gorsuch and what happened around all of that. And it caused me to think back to Justice Scalia, who Justice Gorsuch replaced. And Scalia, former Jones Day lawyer, got to get that plug in, I'm just saying. Brilliant guy, just a super brilliant guy of tremendous integrity. And at his funeral, his son eulogized him. And I thought what he said was really powerful, so if you'll forgive me, I'm actually going to read it to you. And I think it's very pertinent to our topic today. He said, "We are gathered here because of one man, a man known personally to many of us, known only by reputation to even more. A man loved by many, scorned by others. A man known for great controversy and for great compassion. That man, of course, is Jesus of Nazareth." Now, his son, I might not have told you, was Father Scalia. And he continued on in this way, and this is what's relevant to you guys. "In the past week, many have recounted what Dad did for them. But here today, we recount what God did for Dad, how he blessed him. God blessed Dad with a love for his country. He knew well what a close-run thing the founding of our nation was. And he saw in that founding, as did the founders themselves, a blessing. A blessing quickly lost when faith is banned from the public square or when we refuse to bring it there. So he understood that there is no conflict between loving God and loving one's country, between one's faith and one's public service. Dad understood that the deeper he went in his faith, the better a citizen and public servant he became. God blessed him with a desire to be the country's good servant, because he was God's servant first. And there is no more pertinent place than Pennsylvania to tell that story, because Pennsylvania was the great experiment, right? Was William Penn's place, the one place on earth where you could come and practice your religion freely, where no matter who you were or where you came from, you were welcome to come here. And it's commonwealth, a common good. That's why we're a commonwealth. And I think it is incumbent on all of us. I see so many people waiting for somebody else to do it for them, waiting for government to do it for them, waiting for government to solve this problem. It is for each of us to look into our own hearts and to do what we have been called to do in our communities for one another, and not to wait for somebody else to do it, not to wait for government to do it or for anybody else to solve our problems, but to do what my professor told us to do. Figure out what your gift is. Figure out how you bring that to the table. Figure out how you bring other people together and lead them to bring their gifts and get it done, right? Don't just talk about it, get it done. And the last thing I will close with is a quote from William Penn, which I really love and is pertinent to all of us as Pennsylvanians. And you've heard this before. And he said, "I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good that I can do, or any kindness or ability that I can show my fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." Right? So be your Dr. Bob. Make your choice. Bring yourself. Don't be afraid to fail. And find your way to provide leadership through service. Okay? Thanks. That's it.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to Laura's talk. I really hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. You can find ways to connect with her and what she's doing at l3leadership.org/episode 145. A few announcements before we wrap up. I want to let you know that we recently introduced L3 Leadership Membership. That's right, you can now become a member of L3 Leadership. For just $25 a month, you'll get into all of our breakfast events for free. You'll get a free L3 Leadership t-shirt. You'll be able to join one of our mastermind groups. And you'll also have access to our member-only site filled with extra content, resources, and courses to help your leadership go to the next level. For more information, go to l3leadership.org/membership. I want to thank our other sponsor, BAB Inc. They are an insurance broker, third-party administrator, and consulting firm led by my friend Russell Livingston, and they have a huge passion for developing next-generation leaders, which is why they host our monthly leadership events, and we're just so grateful for them. So if your organization has any insurance needs, go to babbins.com and check out their work at babbins.com. Lastly, if you want to stay in touch with us and everything we're doing here at L3 Leadership, you can sign up for our email list on the website at l3leadership.org, and you'll also get a free copy of my ebook, Making the Most of Mentoring, which is my step-by-step guide for getting meetings with leaders. Again, if you enjoyed this podcast, I would really appreciate it. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe and leave a rating and review on iTunes. It really does help make a difference. And as always, I like to end with a quote, and I love this quote I read recently by Bob Goff. He said, "Quit telling yourself who you used to be." I love that. Quit telling yourself who you used to be. Thanks for listening and being a part of L3 Leadership. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we'll talk to you next episode.